All right, welcome everyone back to WX Capital. This is Michael here. We've also got Chi, and today we are joined by a very special visitor. We have Matt Lepore from Breaking Biotech. So Matt, pleasure to have you here. Would love to get a little bit of an introduction.
Sure, yeah, and I'm glad to be here. I like what you guys are doing, and I'm excited to be on the show to talk about a hot topic that's in the space right now. And yeah, for those who don't know, I host a podcast video series called Breaking Biotech. You can find that on YouTube. There's also a website, breakingbiotech.com. But yeah, glad to be here, guys.
We'll make sure that the link is down in the description for all of those interested. Definitely check out Matt's work. Great work. We're really happy that you're joining us today. So, as you mentioned, here to talk about quite a hot topic in the biotech space, and in particular in the oncology space. So, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction about the company that we'd like to discuss?
Yeah, so Mirati Therapeutics, they've been around for a while. I think when I looked, they were founded in 1995, and they're actually a San Diego-based company, which, for those who don't know, I am based in San Diego. And the reason why there's so much interest around them right now is because they came up with a compound that's able to target KRAS, and this has been known as an undruggable target for so long. And finally, Mirati, as well as Amgen, have developed a couple of molecules who can target specifically the G12C mutation in KRAS. And the reason why it's so important is that I think the stat is 21% of all cancers right now suffer from some kind of KRAS mutation. So there's a lot of excitement around being able to target this and really treat these patients. And with that comes a lot of significant potential revenue.
Got it. So that's some really great background. A little bit more about the mutation itself. So you said about 21% of cancer patients have KRAS mutations. What about the G12C mutant specifically?
Do you mean like of specifically G12C? I'm not sure the exact. I think the patient population is around 70,000 people in the U.S. So for that reason, it's a pretty decent patient population. I think the G12D, if I remember, is maybe double, maybe 2.5 times that. So there's a significant number of patients out there that could benefit from this.
Got it.
Yeah, and the KRAS mutation in particular, be curious to hear why it's so important, outside of just the fact that it's common. I mean, is this a driver of the cancer, or why exactly is this mutation so impactful to cancer?
Yeah, so from my scientific days being at the bench, KRAS is the RAS pathway itself is part of this MAP kinase pathway that is involved in cell survival, cell replication. And for these reasons, when it's overactive, it leads to a lot of cell proliferation, and it can be really untethered in this way. So that being such like an important canonical pathway in just general cell behavior, I think has made it an important target. But the KRAS molecule itself, which is amongst a few different RASs out there, was definitely difficult to drug from my reading. So a lot of researchers in the past tried to inhibit its membrane localization because it has to be up at the membrane in order to do its GTPase activity, which is that's the actual function of KRAS. But since then, these molecules that were developed to specifically bind to that cysteine, and obviously the aspartic acid for the G12D, but these new molecules seem to have better activity and lead to actually some kind of effect on reducing the cancer burden.
Yeah, it seems to be some type of golden egg that so many pharma companies have gone after and have failed. It's a really interesting molecule in that sense, that it seems to be smooth in a way where you just can't get anything in to inhibit it. And as you mentioned, considering it's so common and it's such a driver of cancer, it's a really exciting time to think that there could be this undruggable drug could finally be able to be targeted.
Yeah, definitely. And we kind of spoke about this before, how there's probably other molecules out there, these RAF inhibitors that are probably the large portion of the market now, but the side effects associated with that are probably going to be so much higher compared to something that specifically targets the G12C, because seemingly it's not going to affect normal functioning RAS, and therefore you'd end up with less side effects. So I think that's kind of the hope with this as well. And also you could probably dose a little bit higher, which you probably can't do with just a general broad inhibitor like that.
Do we have any specific efficacy or safety data that's been presented by Mirati that's been compelling?
Yeah, so I think it was late 2019 that we saw Mirati's either phase 1 or phase 1/2 data on it was ependicial, I think that's how you say it. It's it's like your appendix can get cancer, I suppose, and they did a couple of patients there, and also colorectal cancer. And I think they saw a lot of efficacy in the non-small cell lung cancer, and they saw nice efficacy in the colorectal cancer, but they were pretty small patient populations. And then they also saw a really good disease control rate, which includes the partial responders as well as the stable disease. So I think there was a lot of excitement around that as well, despite it being an early phase 1 trial. And Amgen also had data released that showed relatively similar data with a larger patient population, except I believe for colorectal cancer, it was only an 8% overall response rate. So that might be an opportunity for Mirati here if they can continue to maintain. I think it was a 25% overall response rate, but only like 1 out of 4 patients. So still early, but I think for that reason, there's a lot of excitement around this event coming in October. The name of the conference, I don't remember, but they're supposed to be doing an update on the monotherapy for both non-small cell lung cancer and colorectal cancer.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so on that topic, would be curious to hear, is Mirati the only company in this space, or are there any significant competitors that we should know about?
Yeah, well, Amgen, like I mentioned, is has their own molecule, AMG 510. I think it has a name now. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but yeah, Amgen's a juggernaut, so they obviously have a lot more resources than Mirati to develop the drug, and also when it does hit the market, if everything goes well, they're going to have the resources to commercialize it pretty quickly. So I think that's one advantage that Amgen does have. And it seems like they're a little bit more ahead with the number of patients they've assessed so far. But yeah, I think where the state is for them is that they're planning to release some data on non-small cell lung cancer in the second half of this year, so should be coming kind of anytime. And they're going to make it difficult for Mirati, but there's no reason why both can't be on the market. Thinking of kind of a Keytruda Opdivo situation. And if it is as efficacious as we think it will be, there's probably room for both of them to exist.
And so I was taking a look at Mirati's stock price history, and it's quite impressive, right? Since the beginning of this year, I believe it's up about 30–40%. And if you bought during the March dip, then you're making about like 100% return since then. Yeah. So with all of that run up, do you think that there is still upside to be gained, or is it mostly priced in?
Yeah, so that's a good question, right? And this is what everybody wants to know: is the run over? What's going to happen next? And I would say that they're early, but what that means is that there is an opportunity for investment as more data kind of gets realized, assuming that it's positive data. But the way I kind of looked at it between the 3 different indications, so the G12C, G12D, and then sitravatinib, which is their other program that we haven't really touched on, but it's to help patients that are refractory for other checkpoint inhibitors, and it seems to be very efficacious. And that one's actually a lot further along in clinical trials. So for the G12C alone, the total market in the USA is around 70,000 patients. And if we assume that they can garner a price similar to checkpoint inhibitors, which is around $150,000, around a $10 billion per year max revenue if they get full market penetration. And, you know, that's always a caveat that we have to include there, but it does give us kind of a metric to look at if this did go well, what they could expect for like a max revenue. So I believe they're trading now at around a $6 billion market cap. So as more positive data comes out for their indications for G12C, we could sort of start to see the stock move in that direction. But as I mentioned, the sitravatinib data, I think that's going to be coming out in late 2021. And they're looking at a patient population between the USA and Europe of around 100,000 patients. So, you know, that's another potentially maybe 10 billion, maybe less than that, that also gets played into the market cap as we get closer to those readouts. And then the G12D, which I think is around 2.5 times more patients than G12C, they're still filing the IND. So it's all preclinical right now. And in 2021, we'll start to see them, you know, initiate trials and stuff like that. So that'll take some time, but, you know, that's looking closer to like a 27 potential billion dollar market. So all of that stuff will come to fruition, but it's going to be a long road ahead. And, you know, you got to look at their cash position, how much they're losing every quarter, and trying to maybe buy on those dips when they do want to raise money. I think that's probably the best way forward. I kind of looked that there was a dip in the last few days. I think they were peaking at around 6.5 billion, and they dipped. They're now at like $6 billion market cap. So I don't know. I think I'm going to start adding a little bit to my portfolio. Definitely the data release coming up in October is going to be something to watch for.
For sure. I mean, it sounds like they're going after several promising and large indications, and they have multiple shots on goal. So even if maybe one doesn't work out, they still have numerous other shots on goal to hit those big indications.
If they are only able to get one of the indications, you know, the market cap would probably suffer, but in the long term, if they can bring it all the way to market, I think there's definitely potential to be higher than $6 billion market cap today.
Makes sense. Do
we have a sense of where this drug might fit into the treatment paradigm? Would this be something like a, you know, first line agent, or is there a sense that, you know, they might start a little bit lower and work their way up?
That's a good question. And I think Mirati's actually started a bunch of trials this year to look, they're looking at first line, obviously, but they're doing a lot of combination therapies. So I think it remains to be seen exactly where it's going to fit. If second line with another combination or first line with another therapy makes the most sense. But I think it's a little bit too early to say right now.
Got it. And I'd also be curious, not sure if you touched on this or not, but I do know that pancreatic cancer seems to be, you know, one of the worst cancers. And if there's any thoughts or any indications that, you know, this therapy might ultimately work in pancreatic cancer, if it's just such a difficult area to develop in that, you know, a lot of companies just steer clear, wondering if that's kind of the same situation.
Yeah, specifically for pancreatic, I'm not 100% sure if this is like a uniquely useful one for pancreatic. It seems like pancreatic cancer does have these KRAS mutations, but, you know, I don't know if the pancreatic cancer market either is that big such that it would be a huge mover for the stock, more so than just general non-small cell lung cancer, which is such a huge market. So yeah, I might not be the best person to ask that question. I'm not too sure.
Got it.
But what are you guys thinking? You guys going to take an investment in Mirati?
I think so. Yeah, I see a lot of upside here, especially just because, you know, the data coming out of both Mirati and Amgen are not all that impressive per se. You have a pretty low overall response rate for Amgen's drug. And yet, even just having that response rate is enough to get people excited about it. So I think in this case, the bar is pretty low in order to really gin up investor excitement. And especially when you start thinking about potential combination therapies and really having the opportunity to work its way up through the lines of therapy, I do see this as overall, a really favorable opportunity.
Yeah, especially with colorectal cancer at only 8% overall response rate for Amgen's specifically. Yeah, even that's got people excited.
Yeah,
exactly.
And for me, I'm always looking for areas of big unmet need, and cancer is obviously one of those areas. And then it gets even better because it's a targeted therapy with specific mutations that are driving the cancers, as well as it's a pretty simple mode of therapy. So it's not something complicated like a gene therapy, right?
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
So it's a very sleek, targeted drug that's aiming to treat something with big unmet need. And like you mentioned, the opportunities are big, yet Mirati's trading around $6 billion market cap. So, there's clear potential for Mirati to keep growing in value. But something that's been weighing me on my mind, and maybe we can discuss this, is the commercialization factor, right? It's like we mentioned, they're going up against a big pharma company, Amgen. Do you guys think that there's going to be partnerships down the line, or maybe even a buyout to make it happen?
Yeah, that's always exciting, right? And everybody loves to talk about potential buyouts. And I hate planning on buying a company for the buyout just because it's so hard to predict. But in this case, you're 100% right. Amgen's going to have such an advantage over Mirati in terms of the commercialization opportunity. But I think Mirati is so far from that right now. Well, maybe a couple years or so. But I think for me, I'd probably look at it, buying it in anticipation of positive data and hopefully realizing that value. And if a buyout does come, that would be awesome. I don't know if I'd feel great about holding it into the launch, though, depending on what Amgen's data looks like, I suppose. So that might be a better question for a follow-up interview.
Yeah, definitely. And something I'll definitely be waiting on is, as you mentioned before, Amgen has tested this in a larger patient population, and Amgen's data looked better when it had a smaller patient population. So when they first had that small cohort, the overall response rate was higher and got a lot of people excited. And then as they expanded that patient population, then the response rate went down. So definitely something I'd say to keep an eye on, a bit of an uncertainty there, at least in terms of my thinking around whether to invest.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that should make people a little cautious about the October event with Mirati.
Yeah, it's always, biotech can be tough in that sense, where there is a little bit of randomness to it, a little bit of difficulty in predicting, how results are going to go one way or another. But definitely think for all of the reasons that we discussed, it's a very exciting company, and one that has a little bit of a David and Goliath story, which I find to be somewhat charming, not analytically, but I do kind of root for the underdog. And in this case, it feels like Mirati is going up. It's going up against a company that is 50 times its market cap. And so, outside of any investments that I make, I'm rooting for Mirati to pull through here.
Yeah, I definitely sympathize with that. The little guy with a great compound, well, hopefully great if everything goes well. Definitely would be nice to see them. And if a buyout does occur, that would be huge too. Maybe incorporated into a huge juggernaut company.
Yeah, and it feels like, it's, of course, as we all just mentioned, it's always impossible to predict these buyouts. But if I were a larger company, I would certainly be looking at Mirati and saying, hey, you've got this, you've got this small company going, standing toe to toe against someone like Amgen with this innovative cutting edge technology, still within the market cap size where a buyout's possible. Mm-hmm. So, we'll definitely be watching that closely.
Yeah, I don't think it's too far-fetched for some company who wants to get a more developed oncology portfolio. It would definitely make sense to get into this space for sure.
Something to consider in terms of buyout, and maybe this actually works well for Mirati, is that in this market environment we're in, typically there's a reduction in M&A activity, since everyone wants to, hedge the amount, like save up in the amount of cash that they have, as drug sales may be declining because people aren't going into the hospitals as much using those drugs or assets. So an example of that is like GW Pharmaceuticals. Mm-hmm. They got really hit in their Q2 earnings since their sales went down. Mm-hmm. And I can expect that other pharma companies are probably feeling that hit to a degree, and they're probably going to be more hesitant for a buyout right now. But with that said, they still have a ways to go. So a buyout in the next year or two, maybe when the economy is doing a little bit better, definitely feasible, yeah.
Yeah, and are you referring to the effect of COVID on people going to the hospital?
Yeah, and generally just in terms of like sales, at least what we saw with GW Pharmaceuticals, sales drop, or not dropping, but increasing at a slower rate.
Right. Yeah, I think I looked at some article. I touched on this in the last video I did, how I think at the peak of COVID, it was like negative 42% of hospital visits in general, just like general practitioner. But I think it's come back a little bit to negative 11 than the normal baseline. So definitely things are ramping up, but it's so hard to predict, and the effect on sales has got to be profound.
Right. Exactly. I have a question for you guys. So something that's been on my mind is more regulatory implications. So the FDA has come out with some pretty shocking decisions with BioMarin, for example, and their hemophilia drug. I was wondering if there are any regulatory concerns, maybe the way the clinical trials are set up or so, that we would have for Mirati.
Interesting. That's really, it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out, just because, as I alluded to earlier, the bar is low for investors to get excited, but is the bar going to be low for the FDA to approve a drug? And are they gonna see it in the light of, well, we're finally targeting KRAS, or are they gonna see it in the light of how much efficacy is this actually producing? So that's probably one area that I think we're wading into a little bit of uncharted territory. And given, what seems to be the whims of the FDA as of late, I think it'll be interesting to watch that one play out.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to characterize it. And it really seems like gene therapy is the sacrificial lamb of the biotech space right now. Cancer, I don't know. I don't think it's going to have as much of a stringent hoop to jump through like gene therapy. So that might be a bullish thing. But yeah, after the BioMarin decision, I'm sort of questioning all of my gene therapy positions right now, because 2-year data is pretty brutal.
It is very brutal.
Yeah, it's so true. But that's a really good point about cancer, is that you can always, go in at a later line and just demonstrate, not even superior, like, non-inferior efficacy, and get in at like the 4th line, and then start plotting your way up to the 3rd line and the 2nd line. So maybe a little bit more room to, to budge there versus something like gene therapy.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I'm thinking of like Karyopharm, some other companies that have these like 5th line multiple myeloma therapies, and they're going to slowly try to build up. And that seems like a much easier task than durability of 2 years for some gene therapy that just seems so hard to predict when you're developing it from the outset.
Something that I've been eyeing more frequently are just like p-values in general. given that one of our positions, Riata, was hit pretty hard, dropped, I believe, like 40% or so when they had an announcement that the FDA wanted them to potentially extend their trial by 2 years to demonstrate better statistical efficacy. Their p-value was like 0.02, and this is for a pretty severe disease, Friedreich's ataxia. So I was frankly shocked. But, you know, that's why, you know, I'm just wondering, like, what else could happen? Could they, Friedreich's ataxia is high unmet need. This is going to be the first drug to address it, but it got pushed back.
Yikes! 2 years. That's so brutal. But that's the thing. The regulators are such a pain because you can't predict what they're going to do. Especially, you know, there's an advisory committee. I don't know if the drug you're talking about had an advisory committee, but even with those recommendations, the FDA is still, it's always a grab bag. So that's the joy of the risk of the space, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that's all I have on my end. Anyone else have any comments or questions or points of discussion?
My final question, I guess, would be like, what could the stock price hit in the year, let's say? And I know, like, we may not have done like stringent analysis on this. I'm, you know, speaking for myself, but, you know, what is the upside potential?
Yeah, I'll do a quick thing in my head. So if this is a year from now, if the sitravatinib data doesn't come out, but we do see maybe some good G12C data, you know, maybe we can round 8 billion, 10 billion. If the sitravatinib data does come out and it's positive, then, you know, obviously there's more upside from there. But if the data is negative for G12C, there's probably some big downside.
Yeah. That is, I feel like that's such a key driver of the Mirati hype that there's a long way to fall if that data doesn't pan out.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, it does sound like area of high unmet need, targeted therapy, a molecule that's going to be pretty easy to administer, store, et cetera, manage. So seems like it's a good opportunity to me.
Yeah, ditto.
Cool. All right. Well, just wanted to say thanks to our guest, Matt, today. Go check out his content at Breaking Biotech. Lots of interesting analyses over there. Matt, thank you again. Thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, Michael Chi, appreciate it. We should do this again.
Yeah, definitely.
If you guys liked our video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check out our website at www.wx.capital. We have a great subscription service that allows you to get real-time trades as well as market commentary, so you know exactly what's going on with stocks and you know exactly what we're trading and what the next hot stock pick is. See you guys around.